it's not working right now. I'll show you what it means. Let's see this box. There's additional microphones, so
right.
Yeah, this one's like an audience mic.
Right.
Gets plugged in like at the back here. So just after it goes on this way, so the dial up, and then you just have to squeeze in these two buttons and then press it in. And you have to try it for a while. And then just release the two buttons and then it stays.
Yeah. Okay.
And you just want to turn it around so it's facing the audience.
And the volume is on.
I think it's nearly up quite high, like on 9 or 10. And in order to like register, you need to press left and right, the right button. Because right now it's just So at the moment you just got it's just collecting sound from this input.
Yeah.
So you just need to press, and it will collect sound from this input as well now.
Okay. I might get that. Other than that, pretty simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just the left and right function is for the front mic. So yeah, it's just how see how you go.
Yep.
It's not actually crucial, so we can always just use the audio from this number one. But
Good.
yeah, like ideally we still want to collect sound from this just as a backup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, dokie. Thank you.
Thanks.
Using the audience, then you bring it into the front.
Yeah, okay, that's a good idea. I was going to do that.
How's it set up to that? I thought there'd be adjustments. Just tested it wasn't in his eyes, so I'll put it there.
Oh, great.
Takes a while to record. You got all the passwords? Passwords. Okay. Not there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
May I put the microphone on you, Ajahn?
For what reason? What? Uh-oh. He's down below, I think. Wi-Fi's on. Mobile hotspot tethering.
Display.
Or do you need to go and get him?
Isn't he coming?
Sorry?
Isn't he coming?
No, he was, Ajahn Brahm has got him. What's it supposed to be?
Wireless display.
See if I can find something here. Wireless settings. Always Wi-Fi is on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Connecting. Connected. So it'll probably take about an hour to get this ready, and then it's time to go back.
Yours is different. No.
Now we know the password and everything, so we can connect as well.
See people just sitting outside my office and just writing on my... No, you don't.
This is what? Oh no.
So you go and find Jack available?
He's in the office.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yeah, he's in the office.
High tech, high talk. Anyway, just to ask people, next Saturday, as you know, it's birthday time. It's also, I've got a meeting. Oh, you found it? Yeah, I've got a meeting in the evening, and a kampa, the nuns one. So we have a choice to do the second sutta class, Word of the Buddha, on Sunday afternoon at say 4 o'clock. Can't do it in the evening because I've got a patimokkha. Or Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Which would you prefer?
Sunday, I think.
So all those who want Saturday, put your hand up. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All who want Sunday, put your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 all.
I don't know, I'll change to Sunday because I think you'll be tired until 5.
Okay, so Sunday at 4. Is that okay? Is that going to make it difficult for anybody? Okay? Sunday at 4 then.
I understand.
You will understand after the talk is
Yes,
finished, but then you understand the Dhamma.
Maybe skip it this week and then do it.
Okay.
I know, you've got to get it going.
I could drive it from my device instead.
Would the bigger one work? I don't know if it would.
I have.
Okay.
I could connect from my device and show it from you.
Oh, it's disconnected into this one. Not
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Actually, I have the last year's version.
Oh, that's close enough.
Okay.
I can use my one here.
Have you actually changed this since last year?
No. Some things don't change.
Yep.
Oh, God. Okay, what are you doing?
You were sitting on it.
Okay. You ready? Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay. I've got Jaiko come up now. No, no, it's near. Two. I haven't seen Jaiko. Okay, let's get started anyway.
Nice one.
Sorry?
No, it's right.
Yeah, because it's his. Okay, now, do you want to get Jaiko to do anything?
I can't get Ajahn Brahm to connect. This is more like yours than mine. I don't know where the link, where the wireless is.
We'll just do it very quickly. I've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
And just, if you just go to the side there, because what I'll do, the word of the Buddha forward, first of all, which is not on that thing, it's just reading it out. In 1907, the pioneering German-born monk, Venerable Ñāṇatiloka, published the English version of the Word of the Buddha. It is described as, quote, an outline of the teachings of the Buddha in the words of the Pali Canon. And it consists of a selection of authentic teachings from the suttas that expound on the core Buddhist Dhamma of the Four Noble Truths, including the Noble Eightfold Path. When I wrote this a couple of years ago, I noted for almost 20 years I've been using the Word of the Buddha as a textbook to introduce my monastic students to the Buddhist suttas. Indeed, every anagarika, that's postulant, and samanera, novice monk, must complete this course in basic Buddhist teaching before they are allowed to receive the higher ordination as a bhikkhu. I have taken such steps to establish quality control in the monks under my training, so at the very least they are made aware of what the Buddha really taught from the most reliable source, the sutta. Unfortunately, there is a problem. Although the Dhamma is timeless, the usual presentation has become as if overgrown by impenetrable thickets of tradition. I have received countless well-intended criticisms that all the repetitions are discouraging, the similes are so archaic as to be obtuse, and some revered renderings of key Buddhist terms are rusted shut. It's working now, is it? Okay, rusted shut. The explanation is well past its use-by date. And I now quote the ancient Chinese saying, rather turn on the electric light than complain about darkness. And that's an example of the real ancient saying, is rather light a candle than complain about darkness. But how many in this room would turn on a candle if it was dark? So say, rather turn on the electric light than complain about darkness. It's an example of just how we can just change the similes to make them more relevant. This little book then is not another translation. It is a new type of translation, not so much for detached scholars, but for those who immerse their whole lives in these teachings. I have followed Professor A.K. Warder's insightful advice that, quote, it is the sentences which are the natural units of discourse, which means explanation, conversation, and which are the minimum units, this is a sentence, the minimum unit having precise, fully articulated meaning. For purpose of study, we have to assign approximate meanings to words and list these in vocabularies. But these generalized meanings of words are extremely vague, whereas sentences have exact meanings. In translations, one may find close equivalent for sentences, while it is often impossible to give close equivalent for words. You can't translate words, you translate sentences. And that's the introduction to Pali by A.K. Warder, page 5. Thus, in order to convey the meaning, I have chosen to translate sentence for sentence, and not word for word. A word has no permanent essence outside of a sentence. My authority to translate rests on my reputation as a well-known Buddhist meditation teacher, trained to think in Cambridge University and then trained to be silent for 9 years under Ajahn Chah. Author many books on meditation, teacher of Pali to many monks, and 47 years now immersed in the life of a renunciant, open to scrutiny. It's always really important. You can say you're a monk, but are you really open to scrutiny? You know, you can get on my tablet and find out what's on there. You can go into my room. For example, for many years I have consistently protested against the traditional translation of concentration for the Pali word samadhi. When they talk about meditation, concentration, I'm just, yeah. Instead, preferring stillness. This is not a trivial point for debate among philologists, people who study words, for it cuts the very heart of the Buddhist path to freedom. Nor is my protest to serve an ego, quite the opposite. The practice of concentration and the willpower on which it depends actually reinforces the ego. On the contrary, stillness and the letting go / renunciation on which it depends brings the ego to cessation. The last paragraph of my introduction, this is not the final version. Translations will always be work in progress. I only hope that this version will elucidate, inspire and challenge. Students have remarked on listening to classes based on early drafts of this book that it's like listening to the teachings and the sutras for the first time, and their power is frightening. And I mean that. And at the same time compelling. As for improvements, I welcome better sentence-by-sentence translations, but only when they are from someone immersed in these teachings, living as a renunciant for the cessation of all ego, or any concept of a permanent essence, within or beyond the 5 khandhas. And last word, sabbe dhamma lalang abhinivesanaya. There is nothing worth keeping. So now the word of the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Now we start off with the 4 Noble Truths. Is it the same as on there? Good. And this is from Digha Nikaya 16. The Buddha addressed the community thus. On each one of these paragraphs I put the reference point there so people can always check it to make sure that what I'm talking about is pretty accurate to what the sutta says. It is through not fully understanding and penetrating the 4 Noble Truths, not understanding them fully, not really penetrating them, that I, as well as you, have experienced the cycle of rebirth and death, samsara, for a very long time. Because of not fully understanding the noble truth of suffering, we have experienced the cycle of rebirth and death by not fully understanding the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, that we have for a long time experienced the cycle of rebirth and death. And you can see straight away there, as the original would actually say, Because fully understanding the noble truth of suffering, we've experienced the cycle of rebirth and death. By not fully understanding the noble truth of the origin of suffering, we have experienced the cycle of rebirth and death. We have experienced this. There's so much repetition there. It takes away its power. So here it just says, by not understanding these four things, that's why we have long experienced the cycle of rebirth and death. From Samyutta Nikaya, so long as my penetration and insight into these Four Noble Truths as they really are was not thoroughly complete in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, and I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world. And what does it mean by those 3 aspects? Here, instead of actually saying one sentence and another paragraph, I decided to put 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C, 3A, 3B, 3C. Just makes it easier to understand. But when my penetration and insight into these Four Noble Truths as they really are was thoroughly complete in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, then did I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world. And straight away, a little point, the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. Nothing beyond that. This is the noble truth of suffering. Suffering is to be fully understood. Suffering has been fully understood. This is a noble truth of the origin of suffering, the wanting causing rebirth. Wanting, the origin of suffering, is to be abandoned. Wanting has been abandoned. This is a noble truth of the cessation of suffering, extinguishing that wanting. The end of wanting is to be realized. The end of wanting has been realized. This is a noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is to be developed. The Noble Eightfold Path has been developed. So that's 4 aspects. So 4 parts, 3 aspects. And the Buddha then says, thus in regard to things unheard before in this generation, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. And of course, that was unheard before in his generation. Was it always unheard? Previous Buddhas. Yeah, very good. And then, after realizing that, this is from the Majjhima, I considered this Dhamma that has been awakened to is profound, hard to see, and hard to understand. Those are descriptions which are common. Peaceful and sublime. Those descriptions stand out. This Dhamma is a peaceful Dhamma. Calms things down. It has the taste of peace. It's unattainable by mere reasoning. Philosophers are great, but sometimes, can it really be gained by just reasoning? Don't abandon reason, because reason gets a lot of the weeds out of the garden. If you just take out weeds from a garden, you don't have flowers. There's much more to it. That's one of the things you have to do, all the silly ideas which are totally unreasonable, and take that further. It's not to be oh, it's gone again. It's not attainable by mere reasoning. It's subtle. It's to be experienced by the wise. And just that much, to experience by the wise. Not just be worked out. Reason can take you so far, and then the understanding is seeing what's beyond that reason. That will take you to things which you experience, the aha moments. But this generation, now what the problem, why don't people see this? But this generation delights in attachment to a self. Takes delight in attachment to a self and rejoices in attachment to a self. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely the empty process of cause and effect, dependent cessation and origination. It's because we delight, we find pleasure in this idea of a self, a me, a core to this mind. Yeah, the Buddha says 5 khandhas are not really a self, there must be something more. We delight in something which we can identify with and attach to and be. And that's the very reason, because a generation delights in attachment to a self and rejoices in such an attachment, it's hard to see this truth, namely the empty process of cause and effect. Instead of a me doing things and me seeing things, it's a cause and effect, an empty process. One thing leading to another thing, which leads to another thing, with nothing going between them, just like a string of beads, but just the beads without any string passing from one to the next. It's hard to see that. That's how things are. And dependent cessation and origination. And again, often we talk about dependent origination, but let's say how the Buddha kept saying it, dependent cessation and origination. Things cease when the causes are gone, and nothing remains. And furthermore, it is hard to embrace this truth, namely the stilling and disappearance of the will. What is that in Pali? Sabba sankhara samatha. Samatha does not mean relinquishing. It means everything gets calmed down, it gets still. And sankhara is a great term used by the Buddha. One of its core meanings is will. Decision. It's what builds things up, what creates stuff. Your will. And it's hard to see that, the stilling of the will. You don't do it. You're gone. And you can understand why it's hard to see these teachings when we say, oh no, there must be something there somewhere. And especially with the will. And the relinquishing of everything that has been acquired. And that most important word is everything. You want to keep something. Well, you worked hard for all of this. How many years have you done so much for others? Can't I keep a little bit? Tiny bit? Well, I can give up lots of things for monastic life and just have a bit for myself. There's one classic case. One of the disciples years ago said he'd like to become a monk. He's a good meditator, he didn't really have much attachments in the world, but he said, as long as I can have every Saturday night off. And that was funny, but it's also saying something. We always want to keep something back for ourselves, my little piece. You can have everything else, Ajahn Brahm, monastery, monastic life. I just want a tiny bit, please. So it's a relinquishing of everything that has been acquired. The destruction of wanting. You don't want anything. I always like that idea because that's something which you can get some time when you're in your hut and you say, what am I going to do? What do I want? Nothing. And if you can experience, what's it like to just let go of wanting, just for a few minutes, just for an hour. For an hour, not want anything in the whole world. Not want jhana, not want enlightenment, not want anything. Then that is where you get very still. This wanting is what moves things. And destruction of wanting, everything fading away. Everything. Nothing left. Your awareness fading away. Your knowledge fading away. Everything you've ever acquired, your learning fading away. The whole shebang, everything fading away. It's hard to embrace that. That's what happens. Cessation. Not annihilation, that's a stupid word. Cessation, things stop. Nibbana. There are beings with little dust in their eyes that are wasting through not hearing this Dhamma. There will be those who will understand this Dhamma. That's the introduction. And sometimes, when you say it like that, you don't hold back. It can be quite heavy. Clear, but very powerful. As it should be. Any comment, questions?
Ajahn, do you recommend that people should concentrate on the first noble truth exclusively, perhaps before going to the second or the third, given that there's 3 phases?
Nah, they're all sort of interconnected. And sometimes people really get into their practice because of suffering. Suffering motivates them. You've had a difficult life. Many of your hopes, were unfaithful to you. I like that word. Somebody said that. So many things are unfaithful. They promise so much. If you work hard, save your money, be good, be kind, then you'll be happy ever after. It's not true. You're happy so much, but it's not enough. It's imperfect. So after a while you get a lot of suffering. And sometimes people who use suffering as their main sort of motivation, like I would say the Buddha did that with suffering, which was the main thing. He wanted to find freedom from suffering. But others just are much more philosophical. They will just want, who the heck am I? What is this? And there's others who just do it through, again, even like the nature of impermanence. Can I find something where I can rest? I don't always have to do things and move, and just this life of anicca is just moving so much. I just want to sit down for a few minutes. And you don't find that. So people are looking at, where can there be some stability in life? So there's the different ways of finding this, and whichever one which really grabs you. But eventually they all come together. And anyway, we start with the Noble Truth of Suffering. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. Any comments, questions? Okay, here we go. The Noble Truth of Suffering. And what is the Noble Truth of Suffering? Rebirth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Death is suffering. Soul lamentation, pain, unhappiness and distress are suffering. And straight away I changed a few of those words there. Because sometimes pain, grief and despair is suffering. That's what it really means. And I think these can be best looked upon as like examples, not precise, that this is suffering, this is suffering, this is suffering. These are just some of the things which people have. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, unhappiness and distress are suffering. You go more deeply into it. Experiencing what is unpleasant is suffering. Missing what is pleasing is suffering. It's obvious, isn't it? How can you overcome that? Can we always have just things which are pleasing? Just people saying pleasing things for you all the time? Because if they don't, then you miss them. So this is obvious, but sometimes the obvious parts of the Dhamma are sometimes the places where you can get the most sort of results. It's a waste of time. Pleasing and unpleasing and searching for this and not trying to get rid of that. It's impossible. And not getting what one wants is suffering. How many of you didn't get what you want today? Oh, you all did, of course. You got some of what you want, but don't be misled by that. And this whole idea of not getting what you want. Welcome to life. And in short, we go much deeper. the 5 components of existence, 5 khandhas that fully describe your body and mind as suffering. Now the 5 khandhas, they call them skandhas sometimes, they call them groups, they call them all sorts of stuff. But again, trying to get a nice translation for them, I chose components of existence to make it more powerful. They're not just any old groups. This is what people take themselves to be. This is existence, this is life. Split into 5 parts. And that fully describe your body and mind. And of course the fully describe, which is the most important part of that. Because basically you can try your very best as a lawyer, as a try to sort of squeeze out some part which is beyond and apart from the 5 khandhas where you can exist. Please let me be somewhere. But then, let's just make a very simple argument. The Buddha does many arguments here. This is one of my arguments. Suppose there was something beyond the 5 khandhas. And that's your essence. That's who you really are. But it's not part of the 5 khandhas. That means it's not conscious. That means it doesn't experience happiness, suffering, nothing. It doesn't even know it exists. Pretty futile and meaningless, isn't it? If it's got consciousness, it's part of the 5 khandhas. So if it's beyond the 5 khandhas, it's unconscious forever. It's like a lump of wood. Is that what you want to be when you go become an arahant?
When you go to heaven.
Okay, anyway, there's so many arguments. So the 5 khandhas is brilliant by the Buddha to get everything together in there. So what is rebirth? In whatever type of beings, whatever species of beings, there is rebirth. In whatever type of beings, even like deva beings, ghosts, all sorts of beings. There is rebirth, coming to be, coming forth, the appearance of the khandhas, the acquisition of the senses, that is called rebirth. And when it says like beings, it really means beings, sattva. So it's not like a philosophical rebirth every moment. It's usual rebirth. And this is one of the nice things what the Buddha says here. You can check it out. Sometimes people get a bit sort of, oh, this is so boring, because the Buddha actually is sometimes like a dictionary to let you know very carefully what he means when he says things like rebirth. What is aging? It doesn't mean like, your robe getting old, or, your meditation getting old. It doesn't mean that. It means in whatever species of beings, in whatever type of beings, there is aging, decrepitude, broken teeth, grey hair, wrinkled skin, shrieking with age, decay of the senses. That is called aging. Very clearly, the usual meaning of the word aging. What is death? Does it mean like the death in the moment? You die to pleasure, you die to what you want. No, it means in whatever type of beings, of whatever species of beings, there is a passing away, demise, a disappearance, a death, a dying, decease, a destruction of the khandhas, discarding of the body, kicking the bucket. I didn't put that in there, but that's the sort of thing which would be put in there. All the different ways of describing the same thing. Death. What is sorrow? Whenever there's any kind of misfortune, anyone is affected by something of a painful nature, sorrow, mourning, anguish, grief, unhappiness, that is called sorrow. What is lamentation? Whenever by any kind of misfortune, anyone is affected by something of painful nature, it's a crying out, weeping, making much noise for grief, wailing. That is called lamentation. And whenever you give any talks, monks, always, just make it a bit physical, and just go a bit over the top, because it wakes people up. What is pain? Ow! Whatever painful feeling results from bodily contact, that is called pain. What is unhappiness? Whatever mental painful feeling arises from the mind, that is called unhappiness. What is distress? Whenever by any kind of misfortune, anguish arises from something of a painful or unpleasant nature, that is called distress, anguish. What is experiencing what is unpleasant? Whoever has unwanted, disliked, unpleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, or mind objects. Is that what you have from time to time? Unpleasant sights, sounds, smells. I eat a lot of beans here, so that happens. Touches or mind objects. Whoever meets those who wish you harm, cause you discomfort or insecurity, that is called experiencing what is unpleasant. What is missing, what is pleasing? Whoever has pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, or mind objects, or whoever encounters well-wishers, those who provide you with comfort or security, such as family or friends, and then you're deprived of such interaction or connection, that is called missing what is pleasing. And what is not getting what you want? Now, this is common in the sutras. Instead of just making it general, sometimes the Buddha turns it to some of the deeper teachings of Dhamma. What is not getting what one wants? In being subject to birth, that's you lot, this desire arises. Oh, that we were not subject to birth, that we might never be reborn. Sometimes people say that. They said, oh, they want to come and be a monk so they don't get rebirth. You're missing something there. Yes, you can't just gain this by desire. This cannot be gained by desire. This is an example of not getting what one wants. In being subject to aging, to disease, to death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, negativity, and distress, they might want. Oh, that we were not subject to aging, to disease, to death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, negativity, and distress, that we might not come to these things. But this cannot be gained by wanting. This is another example of not getting what one wants. Examples of suffering. Now comes the big one. The 5 components of existence. The khandha. What are the 5 components of existence that are suffering? There's a few new translations here. You've heard me say this many times before. I've been consistent over the last few years. What are the 5 components of existence that are suffering? They are as follows. 1, the body. Rupa, that's easy. 2, experience. Didn't say feeling, I said experience. Feeling is a type of experience. Whenever you experience something, you have one of the 3 types of feelings. But what really, my insight into the meaning of that is experience itself. That's part of your states of components of existence. You experience something. And that is not a sort of over-the-top translation. I think it's got a lot of support behind it. You experience things. Perception, can't do better than the usual translation there. Sankhara, I put will and other mental formations, because other mental formations, like some of your thoughts and stuff, but the main part of it is will. What are thoughts anyway? Thoughts are the way that the will manifests. The will is like some course of action by the government, and the thoughts are just the way they debate it and how they make it happen. But the main part of that is this will, wanting to do something. And the last one, probably the most important accurate translation, is and consciousnesses. I don't know why no one else has done that before. Make it plural. The word itself, the Pali word, is singular, but so is trousers are plural, but only mean one pair of trousers. It's just the way that we have these words. But calling it consciousnesses is much more accurate, because when the Buddha describes what he means by vijnana, he means always 6 types of consciousness. And they're totally different. 6 different species, if you like, of consciousness. That is one of the reasons why I translate it as consciousnesses. And that, of course, brings in a whole amazing, obvious insights into the Dhamma. We always think that it's just one consciousness, and different sort of, maybe flavors of consciousness, but these are totally different. And to see that makes it much easier to understand teachings like anatta. So totally different types of consciousness. That's why we call consciousnesses. And these are the 5 components of existence that are suffering, and that is called the noble truth of suffering. It continues here, it is that fuel. This is a question, sorry. Is that fuel, upadana, the same as these 5 components of existence, or is the fuel something apart from the 5 components of existence? The upadana is sometimes translated as attachment or clinging or something. It's not a bad translation. You can't sort of say it's not true to the meaning of the word, but the real meaning, upadana, it does mean upa plus adana. And adana, we all know from adin, adana, where amanisikapadang samadhyam, it's taking up. The upa is pretty much the same as the English word up. It means bringing in. And upadana is used in other places to mean fuel. What actually drives the car? What drives you? I'm not physically. The fuel which you eat or you drink, the fuel of the car. And that gives it a much wider meaning. What is a fuel which keeps this process, the cause and effect process of the khandhas going? Is it the same as the khandhas, or is it something different than the khandhas? Which is one of the reasons why we have that phrase, pancha upadana khandha. So the 5 khandhas, but they call it upadana khandha. Is upadana in the khandha, or is it apart from the khandha? What is this upadana? The fuel which keeps the thing going. You can't have a car without petrol or electricity or something. In the same way that you can't have khandhas without the fuel which keeps it going. But is those khandhas, is that fuel in the khandhas, or what is it? And that fuel is neither the same as the 5 components of existence, nor is the fuel separate from the 5 components of existence. It is the desire and wanting that is part of these 5 components of existence. That desire and wanting, which is in your 5 khandhas. Where would you actually put it? Like wanting. What khandha would that be in?
Maybe sankhara.
Yeah, just sankhara, nothing else. You can see that it's what's the word? It covers a couple of sankharas. You're conscious of it, you experience the wanting, because later on you find out the Buddha says really amazingly that wanting is fun. We like to want, because we don't know much better. But anyway, so it actually goes over a few khandhas. But it's not just in one, mostly in one. It's in the sankhara of the world, but it's also in others as well. So, because of that, it's not apart from the 5 khandhas, it's not different, it's sort of part of these 5 components of existence. That is the fuel that sustains them. It's not separate. The wanting you have in this expression of the 5 khandhas happening in this one moment is what drives it into the future. Not always in the next moment. Sometimes the cause and effect. I know this is Abhidhamma, which I just always grit my teeth against, but it's very true that cause and effect is not always what happens now causes the next moment. Sometimes there's a space between a cause and its effect. Who knows a good example of that? Independent origination. Birth is the cause for death. Jati pachaya. Jati pachaya marana. Sokapari deva dukkhadomanasa upayasapi. So birth is the cause of death. Does that mean as soon as you're born, you're dead? So sometimes the courses have spaces between them, long pieces of time. Sorry, that's better. So, now from Samyutta 22. Any kind of body whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. What is this quote from? You know? Yeah, well done. I thought you got that one right. Ñāṇatiloka. Any kind of body, whatever, past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. Trying to actually gather, there's no exceptions, all bodies. This is the body component of existence, a khandha. All bodies should be seen as they really are, with correct wisdom. How should we regard bodies? This is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. Instead of calling it self, or soul, or me, or whatever, essence is much better. The part of the word atta is something which means just, it's, what's that descriptive word? Part of speech, I used to know these things really well. It means ness, basically. Like happiness, like coldness. It's that, sorry?
Quality.
It's a quality, yeah, qualitative now, which means the essence of stuff. So I use the word essence instead of having any psychological or philosophical or ontological idea of a being. Just call it, essence. So, it's not a permanent essence. It's not mine. It's I am not. Oh, what a relief. I'm old. All these ideas, I don't know who you're celebrating the birthday of next Saturday. It's not me. This is not mine. This is not me. It's a good excuse, though, to raise some funds for New Buddhist Monastery. Any kind of experience, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the experience component of existence. All experience should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. Thus, it's not my experience. This I am not. It's not a permanent essence. One of the implications of that is you can't expect to live permanently happy ever after in some beautiful Disney heaven land or so, because you don't own these things. They're not permanent essence. So even if there was like a happy heaven for all good monks and nuns and everybody, and even ants and mice, you can't say that's going to be happy ever after. It's not permanent. Any kind of perception, whatever, whether past, future or present, one own or others, gross or subtle, inferior, superior, far or near. This is a perception component of existence. All perception should be seen as it really is with the correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not a permanent essence. How many times do you find out your perception was wrong? Now, we get to the nitty-gritty stuff. I've often said before, the two places where the sense of self hang out are in the will and in the sense of knowing, the sixth consciousness. But anyway, start with the will. Any kind of will, any other mental formations, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, may all beings be happy and well. Is that a will? should be seen with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not a permanent essence. If you do have that will, may all beings be happy and well, it's not yours. It's been conditioned into you. As I often said here, you've been brainwashed. It's a nice way to be brainwashed because it leads to the destruction of all brainwashing. And now, any kind of consciousness, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all kind of consciousness. I don't know how the Buddha could have said it to include everything. No type of consciousness excluded. Now, gross or subtle, your own or others. Own or others mean like a God consciousness or a divine being's consciousness. Gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all consciousness should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. So who's listening to this? So on question, what is this process of listening? Because we live in a world which is attached to the concept of self, we even ask the questions in a way which bend the truth. Who is aware of your thoughts? Number one, it's not your thoughts, and it's not a person. It's just an awareness. It's just amazing. If you take away that idea of an I, even in your language, it makes life a little bit difficult, but very interesting. It's one of the reasons she's probably listening to this, she won't mind me saying this. I was just giving a quick talk to one of the nuns overseas, Venerable Chanda, and I said, no, stop talking about my meditation or my practice. It's not your practice, it's not your meditation. Why do you always say, oh, my meditation's good or my meditation's not so good? It's not yours. So how about just saying, just meditation, that's all. And it's nothing to do with you, none of your business. I like that saying, none of my business. So are you happy with your meditation, unhappy with the meditation? As long as you put the you're there, it'll always be unhappy sooner or later. The form-body component of existence, the Rupa Khandha. That's right. Have I rushed off? Right, okay. What is the form component of existence? It is the four great elements and the physical qualities derived from the four great elements. What are the four great elements? They are earth, water, fire, and the air element. That's what the Buddha said, but I usually rush over that pretty quickly. I was a theoretical physicist, and to me that doesn't make too much sense. And people try to argue with me, I said, oh, come on, why can't we just make it like quarks? But you can't even say that anymore, because the subatomic fields of matter are just so many. You get a Higgs boson, and then it just creates more particles you haven't heard of before. But it's much more interesting, actually, when you talk about body, the stuff, is actually to call it just like the forces of nature, interaction. It's more like the result of forces. Like, I won't go too far, like electromagnetism, say. That's all to do with photons. So all this stuff, which is it really stuff, or is it just forces which are happening? The way that things interact together. And it's much more like the interaction rather than something which is really there, stuff. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, because the body component of existence, what the body is, just flesh and bones and hair and stuff. But that's the more interesting stuff. The experience component of existence. There are three types of experience. Wait, no, what three? Pleasant experience through any of the six senses, unpleasant experience through any of the six senses, and neither unpleasant nor unpleasant. neutral experience or any of the six senses. These are the three types of experience. Again, it doesn't really add very much. It's not really inspiring teaching, but it's just making sure that people know what the experience means. Perception. What is perception? There are these six kinds of perception. Perception of sight, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and perception of mental objects. Nothing more. Not there's some super perceptions, which if you get into the realm of supernatural powers, you can get some perceptions which aren't perception of sight, sound, smells, taste, touches, or mental objects. That's all there is. The will and the result of willing component of existence. This is the thing with the sankhara. Sankhara actually is what creates, moves your five khandhas, but it's also the result of those movements. It's being sankharad. So, no, that's not good English, but I think you can understand what I mean. And what are volitions? There are the six kinds of volition. Will regarding sights, will regarding sounds, will regarding smells, will regarding tastes, will regarding touches, will regarding mental objects. Can you have any will if those six senses are gone?
Not according to them.
No. Stopped. The consciousness component of existence. And what are consciousnesses? There are the six kinds of consciousness. Sight consciousness, hearing consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. Now, these aren't like different flavors of the same thing. These are totally different things. There's nothing common between sight consciousness and hearing consciousness, smell, taste consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. They're totally different animals. So it's not just say Ajahn Brahm in a happy mood, Ajahn Brahm in a dull mood, Ajahn Brahm in a sort of a fierce mood. It's not different types of Ajahn Brahm. It's just totally different beings, different things, separate. Dependent origination of consciousness. Should I pause for a question? Got to, yes?
But Ajahn, in the case of, say, thought, language, stuff you read, and stuff you speak later on, they although can be sound, one can be sight, one can be thought, they are all the same ideas flowing through all three senses?
The same ideas, not really. You can actually, can you see what spaghetti tastes like? It's one of the reasons when we do little experiments, like they have those restaurants where it's totally dark. And what you're actually eating, you're not quite sure what you're eating. And afterwards you eat something and say, I don't like that, but it tasted very nice. So it confuses some of the assumptions you have between the intersection of those senses. Anyway, Venerable.
Ajahn, you've used the fruit salad analogy
Yeah.
in your book.
Yeah.
Mind consciousness coming after hearing consciousness or sight consciousness, don't they need to work together? But you only know after what it was. So is mind the main tyrant then?
Mind is the main tyrant, but there's many sight consciousnesses you're not aware of. In other words, the sight consciousness arises, passes away, rises, passes away, rises, passes away. Then when one arises and passes away, and then you know the mind consciousness happens afterwards, you know that. So your senses are very active, but you don't know too much of what they're doing. Like, can you feel the feeling in your butt right now? Now you can. Before you couldn't see it was there. So this This is one of the reasons that fruit salad simile was just trying to find similes to describe these things in a way which people could understand. That was like looking at a plate, or your bowl if you're a monk, and you see an apple in there, and then another apple, and then another apple, then another apple. And then you see a coconut in there, and a coconut in there. The apple's gone, just one coconut. Then you see a banana in there, you see another banana in there, then you see a coconut in there. The coconut represents the mind, banana is smell, nose, apple, eye, whatever. But these are different things happening, totally different pieces of fruit. It's not like one fruit has morphed and changed into something else. One has disappeared, the other one has arisen. It's one of the reasons why in deep meditation you can actually see between. It's a very hard thing to explain, but when you get into deep meditations, sometimes you look at this thing we call mind consciousness, and I'd use a simile of like a stretch of sand. Look at a stretch of sand, a beach, it looks continuous. It's not continuous. You look closer and it's little particles of silica. And there's spaces between them, there's gaps. If you go really between those gaps, there's nothing there. It's not like something is always continually there. There's gaps between things, and that's where you know that apple has arisen and vanished. And then there's the coconut. It's one of the other reasons why the answer to that question, I think, therefore I am. It's wrong. I think, therefore I was. In other words, you have to put the time difference in there. It's a process. And that takes away a lot of the confusion between our awareness of our conscious processes. Now there was another question up here before, okay, yeah, we have the back first and you're next afterwards.
Sorry?
Yeah, yes, okay. Robin.
Going back to Vedana.
Yeah.
So it was defined the types of Vedana.
Yeah.
The pleasant,
Oh.
Is it that Vedana is not, because I always took that to be that Vedana was the pleasant, neutral, or dukkha, not
Yeah.
the experience itself.
Ah, excellent.
So it's the experience.
It's the experience, yeah. It makes it much deeper, much wider. You know, just saying the flavours of ice cream, it's like ice cream is suffering. So it's more powerful. Somehow we think, well, we won't have any of the feelings of, we won't be judging them like pleasant, unpleasant, or in between, but we can still exist.
Is it commonly understood that way? Have I always misunderstood it, or have I been selling it wrong?
It's just because many people are attached to existence, to a sense of self. Therefore, because of that, they just interpret it in a way which is not powerful enough to actually to break through. So there's nothing wrong with saying it's like pleasant experience, unpleasant experience, or in-between experience, but somehow or other it's not so powerful as all experience. Of course, that's all the experience can be, pleasant, unpleasant, or in between. What other type of experience can there be?
Well, because when you first said it, I was thinking contact
Oh yeah.
would be the experience.
Well, contact is what starts the experience, one of the causes for experience happening. But it's all like Vedana, from the word Vedeti, to experience. And the very end, in the state of cessation, the ending of Panya and Vedana. That's only temporary, but all which is perceived and experienced disappears. Sometimes after the fourth immaterial state of meditation. Okay, you have a question?
Yes, Ajahn. I've been contemplating for a while, what's the significance of the Noble Truths being taught in 3 phases, and how how it works as a process of one thing leading to another.
Yes. Why the 3 phases? And why did the Buddha say that, say for example, suffering needs to be fully known? Why say the fully known? Because everyone knows suffering. But to we completely know it, sometimes 99% or 99.9% is not enough. It's been told 100% of suffering. And first of all, it needs to be known. Actually, what are they again? It needs to be to be understood, fully understood. Sorry, I got ahead. To stating what it is, which is like just the view, the knowledge, the statement. And you get that statement. Now you've got to fully penetrate it, fully understand it. So it's what you need to do. So it's not just the theory; it's the practice. So to be fully understood, how do you fully understand suffering?
In the three modes, like before, like any, in the past,
Yeah.
present, future.
Well, yeah, but how do you fully understand it? It has to be the Eightfold Path. That's what you do. It's wonderful in the sutras, they always say the house is done. They always say Eightfold Path, so you can't go wrong by saying house is done, Eightfold Path. So you get the statement of truth. Now what you're supposed to do with this. It's not just believing it and teaching other people this is suffering. You've got to actually fully understand it. When it has been fully understood, the end result of that, then you can say you're enlightened. It's a full understanding. And I say the full is, what is it? Pariññātabang, to be fully understood. Ñātabang is like jnana, it's knowledge, it's not real knowledge, it's really understanding. But the most important part of that is the word pariññātabang. So we've got nibbana when a person becomes an arahat. Parinibbana means total cessation. Not just cessation of defilements, but everything gone. That's always a nice word, pari. Okay, now where was I?
Sorry, Ajahn. Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So I find it a bit difficult to separate out the experience translation of Vedana from, say, perception or consciousness.
Ah, yeah.
Can you?
Because they're all tied together. You can't have Vedana experience without perception. You're going to perceive something. But nevertheless, it's focusing on different aspects of the cognitive process. And why do they do that? First of all, it's not explained by the Buddha, it's just how one sort of maybe interprets it. But first of all, the Vedana experience, the experience just has those different modes. Pleasant, unpleasant, or in between somewhere. And the thing is, you can't control it. If you have one, you have to have the other. As later on you find that, taught about by the Buddha. If you had just pleasant experience, just really pleasant experience, nothing else but pleasant experience, then when it was slightly less pleasant than yesterday, that would be a hell of a lot of suffering for you. When just, the soup was not as nice as the soup we had today, and I said, what do we have to have?
Vegetable.
It's all vegetable, isn't it? Anyway.
Suffering.
But when it's even the suffering is what they're saying, it's a space between two moments of suffering. So as happiness. Happiness is a space between two moments of suffering. And the worse the suffering was before it changes, then the better the happiness is. You can't have one without the other. And that's why, you sometimes look at how we live now. 100 years ago, people would say, wow, you can sit meditation on a soft carpet, you don't have any mosquitoes, you have an air condition, have lights, wow, you're living like kings, queens, really rich people. If you look at the people's houses, you tell them the story of where you grew up the other day. It was really poor. Now look at you. You're living like a king.
King in rags.
Yeah. So, but this is, we take this as normal. Anyway, so where did I get up to?
Will.
Will.
About the coconut.
Oh, that's right, yeah. So what are the volitions? There's 6 kinds of volition. Consciousness experience, 6 kinds of consciousness. Dependent origination of consciousness. So I haven't got there yet, have I?
No.
Okay, here we go. Dependent origination of consciousness is, if the mind sense space is intact, but no mind objects come into its range, then there is no manifestation of mind consciousness. What is the mind consciousness space? It's not the brain, is it? I've got all these lovely examples. I'm sure you've had these examples, seen them. The boy with no brain. The people, his brain is not there. He's got nothing inside of himself. Still, he was an honours graduate in mathematics, I think, over at Sheffield University. That's Professor John Lorber's boy with no brain. There's other people to be discovered with no brain. I always ask this, would you like to move your head back and forth? Can you hear any sloshing in there? You may also be someone without a brain. The mind is not the brain. That's also why it is that sometimes the first 6 years of your life, 6 or 7 years, sometimes you have memories of your past life. Now that kid who's, the Bhutanese kid, I tried to ask him, can you remember anything from your past life? He said, no. A bit disappointing, but I always like to ask. Because sometimes people can. Where on earth is that coming from? It can't be from your brain. It's from, your mind takes over. Why it is that sometimes when people get old and die, they get the terminal lucidity. Their brain is gone. It's just been almost destroyed by Alzheimer's or coma or just a tumour or something. And they can actually remember everything, say, and they know. And there's no way they should be able to do that, because there's no brain left. The mind takes over. Why people have injuries to their brain, and then you get a hypnotist comes along and actually gets you to know what's going on. It's great talking to people who even get past life memories, through hypnotic regression. And they can tell you exactly where they were before. Go and check it out. I shouldn't tell you, who this guy was, but he was the past president of our Buddhist society, so you should be able to track him down pretty easily. And amazing. Just, you could remember where he built his first house 150 years ago.
But Ajahn, could you say a couple of words about the function of the brain, though?
Function of the brain. It does seem to be that the brain, I don't know actually why it exists, but it's there. But it actually just takes over from the mind over those first years of existence. And it just computes everything. But it's almost like the mind is in the background sometimes. Sometimes the brain actually gets very soft and turned off. When it gets turned off, deep meditation. Then most of the brain just is a function to deal with the 5 senses.
Make it coherent, or
Make it coherent, I think, probably make it being able to fit into our society. We're trained. Our brain is trained when we first go to school. Trained by our parents, by our friends. The mind is something different. That's why if you lose your brain, it's not such a big deal. Give you a brain transplant. Oh yes. You heard me tell some of my stories. I can't tell you too much though, because I'm supposed to keep all these things quiet. But that time, actually, many years ago, I was sitting in this hall here, and Ajahn Jacko was the abbot, getting some really nice meditations, and just asking myself, what's my earliest memory? The time when I got the memory of, and I was just a baby. And it's my loophole, okay? It's not a previous life. It's in this life. That's about going as far as I can without breaking my precepts. It's amazing. There's no way that could be recognized in my brain. It was just, and the nice part about it wasn't a memory in the sense that, you know, you remember what you had for lunch today. It was a re-experiencing. You're back there. Weird. But anyway, that's just a mind thing.
Ajahn, was that because the sense of smell came up very strongly for you? That's the...
Yeah, that was one of the senses that came back, yeah. But that was not willed or anything. Just got very, very peaceful and asked myself, what's my earliest memory? And this came up. That just blew my mind a bit. Anyway, if the sense of knowing is intact, the mind objects come into its range, but there's no conscious engagement, then there's no manifestation of mind consciousness. But when the mind sense space is intact, and mind objects come into its range, and there is a conscious engagement, then the mind consciousness manifests. And so with the other five senses, and the origination of each of their own type of consciousness, it's saying it's not there all the time, the manifestation of this consciousness. When those causes come up, and they all come together, then there's what we know as the experience of that particular type of consciousness. Again, saying that they're different. And they say consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises because of sight and visual objects, it's reckoned as sight consciousness, seeing. Consciousness arises depending on hearing and sounds, it's reckoned as hearing consciousness. Consciousness arises depending on smells and odours, it's reckoned as smell consciousness. Consciousness arises depending on taste and flavours, it's reckoned as taste consciousness. And touch and tangibles are reckoned as touch. And mind object is reckoned as mind consciousness, knowing. And whatsoever there is of form, that belongs to the form component of existence. Whatever there is of experience, this belongs to the experience component of existence. Whatever there is of perception, belongs to the perception component of existence. Whatever there is of will and other mental formations, that belongs to the will component of existence. And whatever there is of consciousness, that belongs to the consciousnesses component of existence. Sankhara, this is why I write this down here. What is the sankhara component of existence? The definition of sankhara is the 6 types of will. Will involve the objects of the 6 senses. And that's from Samyutta Nikaya, 22, 56 and 57. Very beautiful definition there, because that says definitively it's chaitana, will, volition, is sankhara. When you say things like that, again it makes the will khandha very easy to understand. It's not just will though, but will is the core of it and expands from that. Now, though someone might say, apart from form, apart from experience, apart from perception, apart from will, I will make known the coming and going of consciousness is. Their passing away and rebirth, their growth, increase and expansion. It's impossible. It was saying here that consciousnesses depend upon the other 4 khandhas. You can't have just pure consciousness without these others. Just as 2 sheaves of reeds standing, leaning against each other, so too with the objects of consciousness as a condition, consciousness comes to be. With consciousness as a condition, the objects of consciousness come to be. So the objects and consciousness, all types of consciousness, they depend upon each other, they're leaning on each other. The sheaves of reeds. If one were to remove one of these sheaves of reeds, the other would fall. so too with the cessation of consciousnesses. The objects of consciousness cease to exist. The cessation of the objects of consciousness, consciousnesses cease to exist. So consciousness is not something always there. It's like a screen waiting to receive the signal to turn on. It's not like a, I was going to say a TV, but that's old style. It's not like a computer. It means that when there's nothing on the screen, the computer turns off. But more than that, the computer disappears. It's not like a screen just waiting for the signal. Consciousness is not some permanent entity just waiting for something to be conscious of. If the objects of consciousness go, so does consciousness. All types of consciousness.
Ajahn?
Yeah.
The sort of force, you were talking about the forces sort of interpretation of matter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, that makes much more sense in the case of consciousness.
Yeah. It does. It's interactions, relationships. Because, for years, science was trying to find the essential particle. That's what an atom was. Atom is a Greek word. Remember your Greek? Atom means indivisible. Like a means basically not, and tom, I think, is to divide or something.
Usually indicates like a particular article.
Oh yeah, no, this is a different interpretation. But anyway, what I read, that the reason they called an atom was they thought that was the indivisible part of matter. And then good old Kiwi, Rutherford, split the atom. And that was actually just, people expected that to be able to happen, but it was actually, for most people, it was quite a shock to split the unsplittable. It wasn't supposed to do that. And that started this whole series of science trying to find out what makes matter up. And they kept on splitting them up and splitting them up and splitting them up. And then you got to a point, you split a fundamental particle up, it doesn't go into something more fundamental. It goes to another one. They keep on dancing around each other. It's just like if I split you up, split Wasaga up, then we get Mudita and Ananda. And okay, so I split you up, and then we get Ananda and Wasaga. It's really confusing. You just can't find out who's actually fundamental to all of this. Because the relationships we have together is more what is fundamental, not stuff. And of course, the reason why I say this, I've said this many times before, the atom and the atma, is there some connection between those two words? One is Greek, one is Sanskrit. I reckon there is. And the Buddha tried. The fundamental particle of the consciousness, the mental consciousness, the atma. Split it up. Oops, there's nothing there. Anyway, so it's now 8:30. Is that enough for everybody, or do you want some more? So it's just over now, but we took a bit of a while to get going. What do people want? Who wants more? Who wants less? So we can't go back in time. Maybe we'll finish off for tonight. How many pages did I do? Oh, quite a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop, because the next lesson, 3 characteristics of existence and then anatta doctrine. That's really nice stuff. Enough for tonight. We'll just do our hug sama.
I thought Ajahn was here.
No, it wasn't, no. You know what to do? But No, that's a Thai tradition. I want just to do Arahang. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suwakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Very good. Okay, so please help just clean up the place, put things away, and see you next time.